In the quiet suburbs of Ohio, the town of Willow Creek was the picture of American perfection. Perfect lawns, friendly neighbors, and nights so peaceful you could hear a pin drop. But on Maple Street, there was one house that broke the mold, one house everyone avoided. The locals had a name for it, the Answering House. They whispered stories about it, about how strange things would happen whenever someone was brave or foolish enough to knock on its door. 16-year-old Ava was new to the neighborhood. Unlike the other kids who crossed the street to avoid the old house, Ava was drawn to it. She loved mysteries, and the idea of a real-life haunted suburban house was too intriguing to ignore. So one evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, she found herself walking right past it. It was an old blue house, its paint peeling like sunburned skin. The mailbox hung on by a thread, and the garden was a tangle of overgrown weeds. Yet, despite its derelict appearance, a warm, inviting light glowed from a window. It looked like someone was home. Overcome by curiosity, Ava walked up the creaky wooden steps and stood before the heavy front door. Her heart beat a little faster. Taking a deep breath, she raised her hand and knocked. 1, 2, 3. The sound echoed in the quiet street. She expected silence, maybe the sound of crickets, but that's not what she got. Instead, something knocked back from inside the house. 3 slow, deliberate taps, perfectly matching her own. Ava froze, her hand still hovering in the air. Goosebumps prickled her arms. The house was supposed to be abandoned. Had been for years, according to the neighbors. She took a hesitant step back, her mind racing to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was an echo? Kids playing a prank? But before she could convince herself, the front door let out a low, groaning creak and swung open all by itself. The air that drifted out was surprisingly warm, carrying the scent of fresh coffee. Peering inside, Ava saw a living room that looked lived in. It was as if the owners had just stepped out for a moment. A newspaper from that very morning lay open on a coffee table, right next to a steaming cup. The television was on, its screen filled with flickering static. It was impossible. This house was meant to be empty, covered in dust and cobwebs. "Hello?" Ava whispered, her voice barely audible. The sound was swallowed by the strange silence of the house. As she spoke, the static on the TV screen seemed to shift and swirl. The crackling hiss began to morph into something else, something that sounded like a voice. A faint, raspy whisper emerged from the speakers. "Help me." A sudden, icy breeze swept through the room, making Ava shiver. It felt like the house had just taken a cold breath. Her instincts screamed at her to leave. She backed away, her eyes darting around the unervingly normal room. As she reached for the front door, it slammed shut with a deafening bang that shook the entire house. The lights overhead began to flicker violently, plunging the room into a dizzying strobe of light and shadow. The whisper from the TV grew louder, no longer just a faint sound, but a chorus of voices filling the room, surrounding her. But the words had changed. It wasn't a plea for help anymore. It was a warning. A dark shadow, tall and distorted, moved across the far end of the hallway. It was just a flicker, there and gone, that Ava saw it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. She finally understood the chilling message the whispers were repeating over and over. Dawn to trust the house. It's not empty. This wasn't a ghost asking for help. It was something else, something trapped, warning her to get out before she became trapped too. Panic set in. She turned and ran, not for the front door, but towards the back of the house, desperate for another way out. She fumbled with the rusty lock on the kitchen door, her fingers clumsy with fear. The metal was cold and stiff. Just as she felt the lock begin to give, she felt a pressure on her shoulder. A hand. It was cold, unnaturally cold, and utterly invisible. She couldn't see anything, but she could feel the distinct shape of fingers pressing into her skin. At that moment, the entire house seemed to groan around her, a deep, guttural sound like a waking beast. The walls vibrated and the floorboards creaked under her feet. It was alive. With a final desperate scream, Ava yanked the back door open and stumbled out into the overgrown yard, gasping for the cool night air. She didn't stop running until she was safely across the street. When she finally dared to look back, the house was dark again. Silent. Still. The warm glow was gone. It was just an old, abandoned house, as if nothing had ever happened. The next morning, Ava returned, this time with 2 police officers. She tried to explain the impossible events of the night before, the knocking, the open door, the living room that was alive with activity. The officers were skeptical, but they agreed to check it out. They forced the front door open, and what they found inside made Ava's blood run cold. The interior was completely different. Thick layers of dust covered everything. Cobwebs hung like tattered curtains in every corner. The air was stale and musty, the unmistakable smell of a place untouched for decades. There was no newspaper, no steaming coffee cup, and no television. Just an empty, derelict house. The officers gave her a look of pity, suggesting it was an overactive imagination, a prank by local teens. They left, leaving Ava alone on the sidewalk, questioning her own sanity. But the house wasn't done with her. That night, as Ava lay in her bed, trying to forget, she heard a sound that made her freeze. Tapping on her bedroom window. 3 slow, deliberate taps. The exact same rhythm she had knocked on the door of the answering house, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, she turned to look at the window. As her warm breath hit the cold glass, it began to fog up. And on the misty pane, a single terrifying message began to appear, as if traced by an invisible finger. You knocked. Now it's your turn to answer.